Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. My name is James Herrick, and today I am here with a film study on UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, and we're doing this in anticipation of his UFC 290 fight against Yair Rodriguez. Now, if you haven't watched one of these film studies before, the concept is pretty simple. Basically, what I do is I watch film on a fighter, and then I bring you two strengths and two weaknesses, and we look at some film of those strengths and weaknesses. And then to close, I prepare some game plans for that fighter and against that fighter. And today, we are doing that for Alexander Volkanovski. The first strength in Alexander Volkanovski's game that I want to look at is his ability to use feints to set up strikes. And it's very rare that Volkanovski is throwing blind shots. And if he does, it's usually something simple like a jab. And even then, he's timing it very well, or he's doing something else to land that effectively. But when he enters with big power shots, or he enters with long combinations, he will use the feint to set up those strikes. And typically he does this in one of two ways. The first way is that he will use the feint to get someone looking or expecting a certain strike. So what that would look like is like if you feint a jab and then throw a leg kick. The fighter would be expecting to get hit by a jab, and instead they get hit with the leg kick. He also will draw counters out with his feints. So what that can look like is he will feint a jab, get someone to throw a counter hook, and then while they're throwing that counter hook, since he knows it's coming, it's very easy for him to avoid that shot and return with his own power punches. So in this strength, we're going to look at some examples of each where he is using feints to set up his strikes. In this clip, watch how Volk enters the pocket with his left hand, and that looks like a punch, but it's not. It's a feint, and that draws out the high guard of Makhachev and gives Volkanovski the opportunity to land this really solid body shot. This is the same concept here. Once again, we see the action from Volk's hands to draw out Makhachev's high guard, and that once again leads to a body shot. Once again, this is kind of a show high and then throw low concept where we see Volkanovski really sell this right hand feint. He even moves his whole body and slides forward a little bit, and that draws the reaction out of Ortega, gets him worried about the right hand, and that allows Volkanovski to slip in a really solid leg kick. In the start of this clip, Max and Volkanovski each throw on the left side. But what I want you to watch is the right hand of Volkanovski. And I want you to watch how he shows that counter right hand. And I want you to see the reaction that gets out of Max Holloway. Max is expecting that right hand. That right hand never comes. Instead, it's a left that whips around. And Volk catches Max with a really solid left hand that he never saw coming. Now we're going to look at some examples of where Volkanovski uses feints to draw out counters. And in this first example, Volkanovski is going to throw a feint with his right hand. Makhachev reacts by throwing out a counter with his right hand. And what that does is it removes the block hand. That is the hand that Makhachev would block a left hook with. That allows Volkanovski to throw and land his left hook. And in this last clip, Volkanovski throws a feint with his right and his left hand. With the right hand, he acts like he's going to grab Ortega's wrist. With the left hand, he acts like he's going to throw a hook. And then that draws out the counter of Ortega and allows Volkanovski to land the big right hand at the end. Now, the second strength of Alexander Volkanovski's game that I want to highlight is his clinch striking. And that may come as a surprise because I don't think that is one of the more well-known aspects of his game. When you think Alexander Volkanovski, you probably don't think clinch striking. You probably think of 5 or 6 different aspects of his boxing, and there's plenty of other aspects of his game that I could have put into this strength because he is such a good fighter. But I want to highlight his clinch striking because I feel like that is a very underrated aspect of his game. And Volkanovski does a really good job of setting up powerful strikes in the clinch. A lot of times this comes when he has his opponent's back pressed up against the cage, in that he can land a lot of really powerful elbows on the inside, and he's very good at setting up those shots. Also, in the open, he has a solid tie clinch as well. Despite his size, it's nothing, outstanding. But it is another small addition to his clinch game that we'll look at as well. But main focus here is on what he can do when he has a fighter backed up against the fence. In this clip, Volkanovski throws a left hand and then posts that left hand on Max Holloway's neck, and that is going to control the head of Holloway and pretty much give him a free shot with this elbow from the right side. In this clip, you can see Holloway has an overhook on Volkanovski's left arm, and Volkanovski is going to want to get out of that. So what he's going to do is he's going to rip through that. But as he rips through that, he's going to throw a spinning elbow from the opposite side, which allows him to land a solid strike as he exits the clinch. I really like the little trick that Volkanovski does with his right leg here. It's pretty simple, but all he does is he uses his right leg to pull on the lower body of Makhachev, get him slightly off balance, create some separation, and that allows him to rip off a three-piece combination. Once again, this is simple but effective. We see Volkanovski start to push Max Holloway to the fence. 95% of the time, a fighter pushes another fighter all the way to the fence. This time, Volkanovski switches up that tendency by throwing an elbow before Max gets all the way to the fence. In this last clip, Volkanovski has an underhook on the right side. Max has his head hanging to the same side. So all Volkanovski really has to do to land the shot is pull out his arm and throw the elbow. Now it's time to look at some weaknesses in Alexander Volkanovski's game. And both of the weaknesses that I have are elements of his striking defense. And I want to put a little disclaimer out there that he's not he doesn't have bad defensive striking kind of overall when you take all things considered. But I do think he has a couple of small holes in his game. These aren't like massive concerns, but there are a couple of small issues. And when you're looking at a fighter like Volkanovski, who is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, a lot of times you're just looking at small issues, and you have to find those smaller details that present issues. So that's what we're going to look at here is a couple of small issues in his striking defense and a couple of holes that I would like to see patched up. Now that we had that disclaimer out there, the first kind of weakness that I want to look at in his striking defense is how he blocks head kicks and kind of his head kick defense as a whole. And the issue I have is kind of theory, right? There's several ways to defend against head kicks. There's multiple things you can do. But Volkanovski's main, way he blocks head kicks is just block, right? I think it's better to slide completely out of the way and just not absorb any of that damage. But Volkanovski opts to block them, and he really doesn't show them a lot of respect in the way of he's not using a hammer block, which is a really effective way to block and covers a large portion of your head and your jaw. Instead, he'll put up his hand like this and really just block a small amount, or sometimes he puts his arm out like this and just kind of uses his hand kind of like that. We'll look at some film here, so I won't get too descriptive with what I'm doing here, but we'll look at some film. But he really just blocks with the hand on either side, and that opens a lot of areas where he can be kicked, right? When you're blocking with the hand like this, it opens up a lot of areas where you can be hit in the top half of the head, in the temple and above, basically, and that has caused him issues. And on top of that, even if he's just partially blocking a shot, that's not great. But also, it's like he can put the hand up and kind of be late with the hand and then get hit with the head kick. So I think this is an issue. So we're going to look at some kind of examples of how he approaches defending the head kick. And then we're going to look at some examples where he really gets punished for the way that he defends the head kick. So that's kind of how we're going to approach this weakness from a film perspective. So let's get right into the actual tape. We're going to start this just by looking at how Volkanovski looks to defend against the head kick. And here we see him just moving away from it, putting up that back hand, and even here he still gets clipped a little bit and it's only partially blocked. In this clip, I want you to watch Volkanovski's right hand and watch how he takes it to the left side of his body, puts the palm out, and uses that to defend against the head kick coming from that side. Here's another example of that same concept, and once again you see him take the right hand, move it over to the left side of his face, and he uses that to block the head kick. This time Holloway hits him, and it is partially blocked. Not ideal, but it is blocked. That type of defense cost Volkanovski in the second Holloway fight, and we can see here he's a little bit late getting that hand over to the left side of his face, and Max is able to clip him on the temple and land a knockdown here. And when you look at the freeze frame, you can see Volkanovski has that right hand up. The issue is that Max Holloway is landing on the temple, he's landing on the ear, and he's landing behind the head. None of those areas are protected in Volkanovski's form of head kick defense. Now, the second weakness in Alexander Volkanovski's game is how he ducks into strikes. And this is kind of understanding because Volkanovski is very, very short, right? Well, I shouldn't say very, very, but he's short for the featherweight weight class. I believe he's 5'6" off the top of my head. But one of the things that being short allows is it allows you to duck underneath a lot of shots because you are short, right? So when a fighter throws a hook at you, you can easily duck underneath it. You don't even have to level change that far because you are short. You can just dip under it real quick. And that's something that he does very well. He dips under hooks and he throws over top of them, something that I really like, and I think that is a large aspect of his game, and that is a strength in his game that was almost included earlier. However, when you have kind of unique strengths, right? When you have a unique strength of something like you can duck underneath shots very well, that comes with a weakness, right? If you're unique in a way, that comes with a weakness. And in this case, since he spends so much time ducking and he ducks so often, he ducks into strikes. And that is not great because the strikes that come from you ducking down into shots are very powerful strikes. Those are knees and those are uppercuts. So there are a lot of times where he ducks into powerful knees and uppercuts, and those are not strikes that you want to absorb as a fighter. And they're also, not easy to block. It's not easy to block either shot. It's a lot easier to block a hook, for example, than something that comes up on the center line. So those are the next weaknesses that we're going to look at, is just how he defends and kind of ducks into some of those shots, whether it be the knee or whether it be the uppercut. Either way, he's ducking into shots, and that is not ideal. Now, in this first clip, I just want you to see the initial reaction to when Max Holloway closes the distance this quick. And that reaction is to duck, and Max Holloway is throwing a flying knee, and that knee almost lands. It doesn't. It clips him a little bit, but it doesn't land. But you don't want to get in the habit of almost getting hit by flying knees. And this is a really good move by Makhachev. He throws a right hook feint, and that draws out the duck reaction from Volkanovski, and Makhachev is able to bury a knee into Volkanovski's body as he ducks down. In this clip, Islam puts Volkanovski on the back foot, and once Volkanovski's on the back foot, he hits two ducks. The first comes in the middle of the cage, but once he gets backed up to the fence, he hits another duck, and that time Islam punishes him with a knee to the body. Now we're going to start looking at some uppercuts, and in this first one, we can see Volkanovski throw a jab, and once he throws that jab out there, his initial reaction is to level change downwards and duck. As he's moving down, you can see Holloway throw that really nice uppercut and sting Volkanovski. In this clip, we can see Volkanovski reacting to the big movements of Makhachev. We see Makhachev step forward and load up a shot. Volkanovski's reaction is to duck. Unfortunately, since Islam is throwing an uppercut, he is ducking right into that power shot. All right, now we're going to switch over and create some game plans. And the first game plan that we have is a game plan for Volkanovski to win a fight. And, this is probably the easiest segment of the video for just about every single fighter. How do they win? For Volkanovski, he's an elite striker. And kind of the way that I look at his skill set is he's an elite boxer that supplements his boxing with elite leg kicks. It's not to say he can't kick to the body. It's not to say he cannot kick to the head. But those are kind of the staples that are present in his game, is the boxing supplemented with the leg kick. And it's a very, very good base for your striking if you can do those two things at an elite level. With the hands, his hand speed is insane. He has insane volume, really good cardio, so he keeps up that volume over the large portion of a fight. and he has outstanding timing. So he's able to time shots and hit you as you come in and hit you as you look to throw. It just feels like that timing and speed combo puts him a step ahead. It feels like he's a step ahead. And part of that is his fight IQ, but part of it is the physical tools as well. They kind of work together to put him a step ahead of most strikers in terms of pure boxing. But at the same time, he has really, really good leg kicks. And since his legs are so short, he's got really thick legs and he can throw really, really powerful leg kicks. And those hurt fighters, and when your legs get hurt, your movement and your footwork gets damaged. And when that happens, you become a sitting target. And when you become a sitting target against someone with really, really good boxing, you can kind of see how you can quickly spiral and find yourself in a really bad position. So when I'm looking at Volkanovski from a game planning perspective, you have to anchor your game plan on your strengths, and that is your boxing and your leg kicks. And if you want to explore outside of that, Volkanovski is really well-rounded. Earlier, we looked at his clinch striking as a strength, but he can also land takedowns. He can also get on top. He can also throw really, really impressive ground and pound. Look at the ground and pound he landed against Ortega in their fight. He can do a lot of good things on the ground, so I also think he should mix it up depending on the matchup. The depending on the matchup is really, really important, right? If you're fighting Islam Makhachev, maybe the takedown isn't the way you should go. But if you're fighting someone with really bad takedown defense, then that avenue is kind of open. So in terms of a game plan for Volkanovski, it would be start with your boxing and your leg kicks, and then figure out the weakness of the opponent and kind of expose that. Since you are such a well-rounded fighter, that is the advantage to being well-rounded. You can expose weaknesses. So start with your strength and then look to expose weaknesses because you have a well-rounded skill set. Now it is time to craft a game plan against Alexander Volkanovski. And just to clarify, this is not a fighter-specific game plan. I try to do these game plans a little bit more broadly so they can be expanded to fighters with multiple skill sets and not just one. So I'm not going to look at how can Yair Rodriguez defeat Alexander Volkanovski. This is kind of a broad range of what a fighter can do against Volkanovski. And I think the game plan should be centered around finding a finish. And finishing a guy like Volkanovski is not easy. I'm not saying it is, but I think you have a better chance of finishing him than beating him in a decision. I know that Islam Makhachev just beat him in a decision, but I do think that changes a little bit when he goes up to 155 pounds. Some of his strengths are not as pronounced. So at 145 pounds, his natural weight class, I think it's easier to finish him than beat him in a decision. And when you look at some previous fights, the fights that he has almost lost, it's been because Brian Ortega almost choked him out in that guillotine. It was because Max Holloway dropped him twice in their second fight. If you want to go further back, Chad Mendes had him kind of hurt in their fight. So I think the power in the finishing is what can cause Volkanovski some problems. And also in Volkanovski's skill set, as we just discussed, really, really good cardio, really good IQ, really good pressure, really good volume. When you expand those things over 5 rounds, it's very hard to find success in the later rounds against Volkanovski. And it's kind of, very hard to win 3 rounds, especially when you're looking at rounds 4 and 5 as rounds you're probably not going to win. So I think finding the finish is by far the best outcome if you're fighting Volkanovski. Now, in terms of like actual skill set things you can do, I believe it starts with the range and range management. This is something that Volkanovski is very good at, but you really need to be diligent in keeping the fight in kick range and not boxing range. I think one way that you can do this is to throw some teeps. I think the teep is very good and would work well against Volkanovski to, one, establish range and prevent him from crashing into boxing range. But he also doesn't block body kicks at a great level. So I think a teep would be a great way to keep him out of boxing range, or at least stifle him or slow his ability or make it so he can't get in boxing range as frequently. So I think that would be a good start, would be the teep. And then from there, working some more body kicks. So working just your traditional kick to the body. I think that is beneficial because he doesn't block the body kick as effectively as he does other strikes. So work in that body kick, which something we haven't talked about yet, but the body kick would be a good start. And once you're able to get that body kick flowing, I do think that opens up other things as well. One thing that Max Holloway did a couple times was he landed a body kick and then threw punches afterwards. So he started the combination with the kick. I think that would be beneficial. Throw the body kick and then look with straights behind it. That is very, very risky. But I think you need to take a risk when you're fighting a guy like Volkanovski. So that is something that I would throw in there as well. And then once again, off the body kick, if you're landing the body kick, you then have more opportunities to land the head kick, which we discussed as a weakness. So in terms of kicks, teeps, and then traditional body kicks, punches behind them, and then head kicks. And in terms of actual combinations and boxing combinations, right, we talked about how he ducks into uppercuts. And one of the reasons for that was because he can duck under hooks. So what I would kind of advise is to go hook uppercut combos. Throw the hook, get him to duck the hook, and try and stick him with an uppercut afterwards. I don't think that is something that will work every time, but I do think you can do some fight-changing things when you are mixing in the uppercut after the hook. So the hook uppercut combo is one that I like for a fight against Volkanovski. And the last thing that I would look at while, game planning for Alexander Volkanovski is, have some self-reflection. Look at yourself and go, how is my style combated? What can you do to find success against me? So let's use Max Holloway, for example. One thing that Volkanovski did was hit him with leg kicks to hamper his speed. He hit him with counter shots to dissuade Max from pressuring with volume. Those are things that kind of really took some of the strengths out of Max's game and made him a much more beatable fighter. So if you're fighting Volkanovski, look at your own game and your own skills and your own skill set and figure out how can that be countered. What will someone do to lesser the effectiveness of my strengths? What will someone do to expose my flaws? That's probably not a fun thing to try and figure out on your own, but that is something that Volkanovski will do. He will attack those aspects of your game. So come prepared for those elements as well as just how you don't need to know just how do you beat Volkanovski, but how will Volkanovski try and beat me? That's another thing that rarely gets talked about in some game planning scenarios, but I do think it is important always, but especially important against Alexander Volkanovski. Thank you for watching this film study on Alexander Volkanovski. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you did, check out some of the previous film studies. They're up on the channel. And make sure you subscribe to Vendetta Sports Media, Vendetta Sports Media Podcast Network, all the Vendetta Sports Media YouTube channels. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all that. And make sure you go check out the website, vendettasportsmedia.com. Not just UFC content up there, but content for pretty much every sport, whether it's NFL draft, basketball, whatever you like. It's up there on the website, so make sure to check that out as well. But most importantly, thank you for tuning into this film study. We'll catch you later.